Well, welcome back to webinar number 2. I'm Dr. Jennifer Love, and with me is my colleague and co-author, Dr. Kjell Tore Hovik. And we are talking about our book called When Crisis Strikes, 5 Steps to Heal Your Brain, Body, and Life from Chronic Stress. It's available for pre-order and for delivery and order after December 29th of 2020. So if you're watching this after then, you can go ahead and buy it today, but it's actually already available on Amazon in the US and the UK, and is on its way to being published in Russian, which is interesting. So in the first part of our webinar trifecta, we talked about us and who we are and why we collaborated on this book. And today we want to get a little bit into what it is. And we talk about these 5 steps in the book, and we are not allowed to disclose all of them, but you'll get little secrets. But I really think it'd be fun to talk about how we developed this model. This is a new model. This was a thing for both of us, and why we had this many steps, and that whole process of how many steps does it take? Like, do you have 20 steps? That's too long. Can you have 3? That's too simple. Like, how do we make it memorable? But how do we dig deep enough that it's meaningful? And so this was, I don't know, months and months in conception. And so anyway, Kjell, you were the one who suggested, I believe, 5 steps that we incorporate 5, and you had some, what I thought at the time were very questionable reasons for that. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Right. Well, I think that, we're both, in our professions, we're used to working with people that are in difficult crisis situations. And it takes time. It takes a process to work through these difficulties with them. And we were thinking of, when we were discussing this originally, what are the steps? What is the process that needs to be in place to make a change, to make a behavior change, or to make or to heal a crisis situation or a very stressful situation? And we were, brainstorming with a lot of these different ideas. And I think I know as a psychologist, often I think about, if you have lots of problems and difficulties, and it's in your head, and you're struggling with how to respond and with emotions, and you're not really getting clarity, it's often a good policy just to try to, or a good practice to get things out of your head and put it on either paper or out somewhere. And when I was thinking of just getting it out, I was thinking, hey, there's something here that's like my hand. That's a place to get it out. And of course, and I remember I had a period when I was studying a lot of philosophy, and one of my favorite philosophers, Immanuel Kant, had this idea of the hand being kind of the outer brain. So you have a brain here where you have different sections, different parts that all have different functions, and then they work together. They're able to work together to make a product. And it's the same thing with the hand. I was thinking, you have different fingers, each have a different role, and yet they're working together is what makes them really effective and positive, and something that can really be worked on and is easy to remember. So we were working on those 5 elements, and then we were putting, all the brainstormed effective techniques and processes into those 5 fingers as a way of then getting, a full, complete process to make a change for the better, to heal, a healing process.
And what were you calling that model?
Well, I was thinking, well, it's like the hand model. I was thinking you could call it that. And I guess that was one of,
absolutely forbid you from calling it.
So it was one of the ideas that, it's an idea, but yeah, you rightly shot it down to call it that anyway.
No, I think in English that just means something different than it does in Norwegian. I don't think that translates well. But it ended up being really interesting. We started on this research of all the fingers on the hand. And we were thinking about all these tools in a psychologist or a psychiatrist's toolbox and how to organize them in a way that made sense as we went through the hand. And the first one was really, so we researched everything from what each finger does down to like really weird stuff. Like if you were to have to cut off one finger, like what should you choose? There's like a lot of stuff on the internet about that, by the way.
Yeah.
It's weird. But we had these huge, like red and wipe off boards, and we read all these ideas, and it just kind of went back and forth. There was a lot of time that went into the formation of these. And I think the one that we will talk about a little bit today was the first one, which is the thumb, which is called Get a Grip. And I actually have a picture of you. You don't know this. And I'm going to share just for a second.
Oh,
Oh, where did it go? Okay, 1 second. I know I was trying to surprise you because I went digging into the archives of Dr. Hovik and found this.
Oh, there you go.
Dr. Hovik, who has a ginormous thumb with literally a ginormous thumb.
Yeah.
And yeah, I thought that should be the cover of the book. But, you know, I got voted out. So anyway, step one, getting a grip. So really, you know, in general, what do the steps do? Why don't you talk a little bit about step one? You wrote the chapter on step one, right? Yeah. I'm trying to remember who wrote what.
Right.
But why don't you give like a little overview of step one?
Right. Well, I mean, you know, we put a few different elements in each of the steps. So there's like kind of maybe three major elements in the first step, get a grip. And as a neuropsychologist, I'm doing a lot of testing about, you know, focus and concentration and memory and other type of what we call cognitive aspects. And one of the things that I'm really very interested in is this idea of being able to control your focus and concentration. It has to do with insight, self-insight, and your ability really to actually put your focus on, you know, what's really the problem at hand. So there's a section that really just starts off with understanding different ways of gaining a better focus and concentration, and then we go on to I don't know. Can I say what we do through there? I mean,
yeah. Well, I mean, you're sounding very doctorial right now. But I think it's getting a grip on the problem is, you know what the crisis is, right? Like I'm getting a divorce, or my child's not doing well in school, or my child has an addiction, or my spouse has an addiction, or someone I love has cancer, or I have cancer. We know what the crisis is, but it's really about the context, right? What is the meaning of the crisis for me? Because as we know, you and I could go through the same exact life crisis, and we have gone through some of the same life crises, and we respond very differently. And so it's kind of, you know, you're talking about, you know, gaining your frontal lobe attention. Really what you're doing is taking the reader on a gentle excavation of why they are responding, why their bodies are responding, and why their emotions are responding to the depth that they are. So it isn't just the thing, it's the thing that's happening to me. And so I will be responding differently. And my response may be very exaggerated to an outsider because of my past experiences. So the first step is really getting that understanding. And so that's what I really, and I love how you do it in the book. You have this very scientific yet approachable way of doing this, because again, this is all about things that are accessible and gaining understanding.
Let me just add there, Dr. Love, that right, you've written the chapter ahead of that, before that, describing really what happens in a crisis, which is describing the stress response. That's also, an individual contextual thing that we go into working through the steps. But there's that stress reaction, and then really step one is the not the antidote, but the start of taking control of the stress response, right? Because the stress response is like a bomb blowing up in the desert, just throwing everything up in the air, and your emotions and your ideas and your behavior, and you're just reacting. You don't have any control. So how can we start that process of gaining a grip or control over your body, your feelings, your emotions, your behavior, your sanity? You have a chapter that's like from pain to sane, right? So that's right. That's the chapter before. But then we get into, okay, here we're going to start with this. We start with this, then that, then that, then that, then that, and then help the person go through that healing process over time.
Right. And what you said just reminds me of something one of my patients said to me. And she said she had a trigger in her life, and she described it as stepping on a landmine. She said, you're just walking along, and then boom, unexpected, like your brain is a 5-alarm fire. And you're right. We should maybe explain kind of the structure of this book and how it's different than a lot of the other books that are out there. We really start with this discussion on why we feel the way we feel when we have these stressors in life. We talk about how there's just a short, science-friendly chapter on how the brain serves as command central, sounds the alarm when there's danger, and how our body responds, and how we're really wired to respond to very short, specific, distinct crises. Like when humans used to live in caves, and you run into the bear, right? And you're going to fight or flight, and fight or flee. And how, even though we've moved into cities and suburbs and all of that, we don't have bears, most of us. Some do. But our systems for sensing danger and responding to it haven't changed. And so we are still wired for this one big thing. And so when we have these life stresses that are chronic, when chronic stresses start piling on top of each other, we have, like, look at 2020, right? We have a pandemic, we have economic fallout, we have in the US a contentious election, we have social justice reform movements going on. And then on top of that, we have life, right? All the things that happen to us, the California fires, and there's everything that's going on. In addition to that, there are people who are in the middle of divorce, and there are people who are diagnosed with cancer, and all those things. So they tend to compile, and physiologically, we aren't wired to handle that. So we start gaining weight. We start waking up in the middle of the night, and we're just staring at the ceiling. We get the muffin top. We're totally fatigued. We have sugar cravings. So many of these symptoms. So we explain those at the beginning of the book. At the very end, like you said, there's that chapter called From Pain to Sane that really targets 5 of those key symptoms, low libido and other things, and kind of gives plan for getting back on track with that. But in the meantime, we introduce these 5 steps with a patient, a protected patient named Nina. And so we demonstrate how Nina, with her crisis, works through each of these 5 steps. And then the second half of the book is all examples. We literally talk about who can benefit from the book. And I think we'll focus on that in our final webinar series. But that's really how the book is kind of outlined. In your mind, Kjell, as we look at these steps, like, what do you see the steps in general doing? Because we know the steps themselves can't solve the life crisis, right? The steps can't take away cancer, can't treat the PTSD. But what are some of the things that you see the steps doing?
Well, I think one of the important things at the very beginning, which is also in step 1, is just this idea of understanding what affects us and our responses as well. So there's this idea of mapping out all the stressors in our lives, and that's going to be very individual, as you said. It's contextual, right? And I can experience this when I have classes and groups of people. If there's like 4 people, they all have, there's a breakup situation that they're struggling with, but of course each of those individuals have completely different factors that are stressful for them. It might be something, chronic illness. It might be, family members. It might be children. It might be financial aspects that are stressful. There might be even some threats that are involved. There might be a legal action. So getting a good overview of all of these very stressful elements is really part of that first step that's really important. And just to understand how one reacts to that is the key, I think, is as a start. And then maybe choosing something that can then, let's say, an issue that is like overarching, that's going to be what we're going to be working on, and we're going to help heal through that process of the steps.
Mm-hmm. I see it as, I say to my patients all the time, like, you look like you're plugged into a light socket. And that's what happens to us. We get these really intense emotional reactions. And then the first thing we do is our brains want to find the fastest route to ending the pain. And so we tend to start out with the crisis with escape mechanisms. We talk about this in the book: having alcohol at the end of the day, escaping into work, escaping into video games, pornography, marijuana, like, it's endless. And really, to get a grip on what's going on, you have to stop that pattern of escape. So there's a whole section on even motivation for change and how do you do this. But understanding that. What I love about the steps in general, and I think I said somewhere in the book that really the intent is when we feel helpless, and oftentimes the crises feel out of our control, this book gives the tools to kind of challenge that helplessness to a duel, right? That I don't have to feel helpless. And there are times we are out of control. When you go in to have surgery and you get put under anesthesia, like, I'm a doctor, I lose control. And that I just have to wait until I wake up, if I ever wake up, and see if the doctor did the right thing. There's always things that are going to be out of our control, and we feel helpless over a lot of these things. And so as part of the 5 steps, we look at what we can control, what we can't, what we can do about those things. And we kind of walk people through this process that helps them get a sense of ownership. And so their brain, the alarm is minimized. It doesn't keep sounding over and over and over again. And people can feel a sense of mastery and confidence, despite this crisis being ongoing.
It's almost like it's a really, really well described there, Dr. Love. And it's like this idea, or the image I get is when you're a child and something is just very, very chaotic, and your mother or father, they're just using their hand to kind of, touch your forehead. That's really the function of the book, I think. It's something outward that's helping support your struggling with emotions and thoughts and behavior, and just having it something outside saying, okay, it's going to be okay. Here's what to do. Follow the steps. And that's going to be your pathway to a healing process.
Yeah, and here's how to do it. I love that analogy, that nurturing analogy. I love it. Well, I am really excited to talk about the content of the book, which I think we're going to save for our very last pre-release webinar. But I'm really excited to talk about that and to share that. And so I hope, everyone who joined us today, again, just enjoys having a little peek inside of the book and these 5 steps and how they were created and unique. And Dr. Hovik, you're also studying them right now. Is that right? So we may have some actual scientific data at some point.
Right. I'm really excited about what we're doing. I've got some of the key professors and psychologists at the local college really excited about trying to put this out in study form, right? To compare it maybe to some other types of therapeutic approaches to see how it works and how it, to get some real data on it. I'm one of the therapists, or one of the kind of the supervisors in some of these courses, and it's just an amazing experience because they're getting very, very good feedback about how they're experiencing it and how they're learning to take control over their lives, to put things in place, to make changes, and how things are working out. But we'll have to wait and see what the data shows. So we're doing this in a very methodical and scientific way, and we've got a good team behind us.
The cases that we have in our book that we go over with all of these very situations that we'll talk about in the third part of the webinar, we've seen these steps work so many times before, but as a science nerd, I just love the fact that we're able to collect data on it and have something to hopefully publish in the spring. We'll see how it goes. I want to thank everyone for joining us for the second part of our webinar series for the book, When Crisis Strikes, 5 Steps to Heal Your Brain, Body, and Life from Chronic Stress, available on Amazon. And we look forward to seeing you in the third and final part of our webinar series. Have a great day.
Have a great day.